You're sitting on the couch, you're watching TV, and your life is passing you by.
We've all been there. You're sitting on the couch, you're watching TV, and your life's passing you by. You keep procrastinating over and over again. Should I block this person? Should I not? It could be anybody, from an ex who keeps posting about their best life, a former friend whose passive-aggressive comments cut a little too deep, or even the President of the United States. The temptation to hit that block button grows with every scroll, promising instant peace of mind. One click and they're gone from your life. Problem solved. But what happens when we turn this digital solution into our default response for handling real-world conflicts? Today we're talking about the concept of blocking, not just on social media, but as a human reaction to dealing with or avoiding problems. To dig a little deeper, let's explore this phenomenon through what used to be one of my favorite shows, Black Mirror, specifically the episode aptly named White Christmas. So if you've never seen Black Mirror, it's an anthology series on Netflix where each episode usually has some form of dystopian technology that isn't quite what we have in the real world, but not too far away either. This episode explores 3 stories told by Matt from a remote cabin on Christmas Day. These 2 guys, Joe and Matt, they've lived together in this cabin for 5 years, but they don't really talk. Matt is like a real yapper, but Joe's just a chill guy trying to get through the day. As they ease into conversation, Matt explains how he ended up doing this remote work. He explains he used to work as this advisor that would walk people through social situations, through picking up women and how to behave on dates, stuff like that, using these Z eyes that everybody has. So in this world, everyone has Z implants that transmit the user's vision and hearing, a permanent human feed, always online. The ZI system is perhaps one of Black Mirror's most terrifying technological concepts because it's not just invasive, it's mandatory. Imagine never being able to turn off your feed, never having a moment of true privacy. Your every experience, every visual input, every conversation is being transmitted and potentially recorded. It's like having a body cam that you can never remove, paired with augmented reality that you can never escape. But what makes the ZI system particularly disturbing is how it's weaponized for social control. The ability to completely block someone isn't just a digital function, it turns them into a little gray blur in your vision. Their voice muffled into incomprehensible static. It's social media blocking taken to its most extreme, horrifying conclusion.
Turn it off! You turn it off!
The implications are staggering. What happens when someone in power decides to block you? What happens if emergency services can't see you? What if your entire community decides to block you at once? The ZI system transforms the simple act of blocking from a minor inconvenience into a potential death sentence of social isolation. So, Matt continues about his past work of helping guys go on dates, as well as detailing his former job of training quote-unquote cookies. So like these little digital clones of people that are stored inside an egg. Although to the cookie, they don't believe they're digital or a piece of code. To them, they're a real human that went in for a procedure and they're now trapped in this infinite white, upside-down world. It's almost one of those moments when your coworker has been sharing a little bit more than usual and you're almost expected to reciprocate. So Matt turns to the tables, he turns around and he says, "What about you, Joe?" Joe listens to Matt's story with growing disgust, particularly about the torture of the cookies. Matt, noticing Joe's reaction, he shifts his tone, his posture, and he attempts to manipulate the conversation. "You're a kind man, am I?" Joe's voice is low and heavy with doubt. "Well, based on how you've reacted to what I've said, yeah, I can tell that you're kind." Joe's response comes out like a confession. He says, "I'm not a good man." Joe embodies the archetype of a well-intentioned but deeply flawed individual, like all of us. Someone whose good heart is overshadowed by poor decisions and an inability to handle social situations with grace. Joe opens up about his own past, detailing him and his ex-fiancée Beth. He described their relationship as not being perfect, but they were making it work. During a karaoke night at a local bar, Beth takes the stage to perform a love song. As she sings, there's an unmistakable weight in her eyes, a guilt that seems to speak volumes. Across the room, her coworker Simu Lu watches her performance with an intensity that suggests more than just professional admiration. Joe's world turns upside down. While he's taking out the trash, he discovers a positive pregnancy test. The subsequent confrontation with Beth, it quickly escalates. She's adamant about terminating the pregnancy, while Joe desperately pleads for a discussion.
I mean, it's our baby.
I know, and it's not easy for me.
Well, let's at least discuss this.
No, I've made up my mind.
Well, I haven't. Oh, God, look at you. You're pissed. You drank all night, Beth. You drank all night. Jesus Christ, you're pregnant.
Yeah, well, I don't want to be. And I'm not gonna be.
You're being a bitch.
Stop it.
You're being a cold bitch who would kill a kid.
No, that's not
Who would get
fair.
it torn out because it doesn't suit her plans.
Stop, or I'll block you.
Don't you dare.
No, we can talk tomorrow. Just please stop.
Don't you
And Beth turns on her Zed eyes and blocks Joe, turning him from a human into a blob. The implications of this barrier become immediately apparent. Beth vanishes from their home the next day, and the block prevents any form of communication from Joe. No calls, no texts, no way to bridge the growing divide. When Joe desperately shows up at her workplace seeking answers, he's met with another dead end. Beth has resigned, leaving no forwarding address or any means of contact. The digital wall she's erected has become this impenetrable fortress that's extended to the real world. In Black Mirror, the concept of blocking evolves into something far more sinister. One day, while walking through town, Joe spots Beth and she's visibly pregnant. The realization hits him like a punch to the gut. She kept the baby. His baby. Overwhelmed with emotion and desperate to connect, he runs towards her, only to be immediately arrested. This violation escalates his status from just a personal block to a legally binding block. Now, thanks to the GPS tracking in his Z eyes, if he comes within 10 meters of Beth, law enforcement is automatically dispatched to come get him. Going down the drain with desperation, Joe clings to the only thread connecting him to Beth, her father's address. He starts writing letters. They pile up unanswered, each one a testament to his growing loneliness. On Christmas Eve, drawn by the knowledge of Beth's annual tradition, he makes the journey to her father's property. The sight of Beth and her father holding his child, which appears as nothing more than a gray blur, because blocks extend to offspring too. Year after year, this becomes Joe's own twisted Christmas tradition, until that fourth year when he leaves a present and finally glimpses by the pink toys that he has a daughter. A moment of connection in a world designed to keep them apart. Joe is at home, flipping through the channels to pass the time. Suddenly, the news comes on reporting a train crash with 26 casualties. As the newscaster is flipping through the victims' photos, Joe sees her after almost 5 years. It's Beth. When someone dies, the block dies with them. Joe's overcome with emotion, realizing he'd almost forgotten what she looked like. After Beth's death, Joe decides to do what he believes is the only sensible thing, reconnect with whatever remains of his family. So with Christmas approaching, he wraps a snow globe and he marks on it, "From Daddy." He drives to Beth's grandfather's property, and when he steps out of the car, there she is. His daughter is playing in the snow, no longer a gray silhouette, but she's wearing a bright purple coat. He approaches her with care, trying to get her attention, and he says,
Hello, darling.
You are not the Bob.
Joe, stunned, she goes walking inside away from this stranger, and Joe, in an emotional daze, reluctantly follows her. As he's walking through the hallway, he's having flashbacks. Memories are clicking. Small things that you'd ignore before suddenly make sense. Glances, advances, subtle romances between Beth and her married coworker, Simu fucking Lou. Now, upon further reflection, when I went back, if you look at this clip, I mean, you know, her sitting on his lap, that would have been a good indication to me. But okay, Joe. Beth's daughter runs into the kitchen where her grandfather is preparing lunch. The warm aroma of food filling the air, the peaceful domestic scene is shattered by Joe's intrusion.
What are you doing here?
The grandfather's voice is tense but controlled. After Joe tells him about Beth's debts, his response is firm.
There's nothing for you here.
Where's my daughter?
He manages, fumbling with the snow globe that he brought as a gift, the weight of years of separation and loss evident in every word. The kitchen becomes a stage for this standoff. The grandfather, one hand discreetly moving towards his kitchen knife, he tries to reason with Joe. His voice is gentle but firm as he reveals a painful truth.
If this is about those letters, I threw them out before she saw them. She was a mess. She'd had to leave everything behind, and
I want to see my daughter.
I think you should go.
The pain of realization that he never had one to begin with is dawning on his face. He stands up as Grandpa approaches him.
I want to see my daughter.
You have no daughter here!
This was the snapping point for Joe as he strikes Beth's grandfather with the snow globe for what he thought was his daughter. So what happens to the girl? She stayed in her hiding place. The terror of witnessing a stranger attack her grandfather kept her silent and still. A day later, on December 26th, after a full day of complete silence in the house, the young girl finally gathered her courage. She placed a small, handmade Christmas present beside her grandfather's motionless form, a final gesture of innocence in a moment of tragedy. Then she goes out into the snow to find help, but she didn't make it very far. All of this devastating chain of events began with the simple click of a block button. In our modern world, we've grown accustomed to dealing with problems through digital solutions. A quick block, an ignored message, a deleted contact. But real-world conflicts can't be resolved with such simple actions. When we choose avoidance over confrontation, we risk setting in motion consequences far more severe than the original problem we tried to escape. In this age of endless distractions and easy escapes, we must remember that genuine human connection matters. Instead of running from difficult conversations, break them down into manageable moments. Speak the truth with compassion and courage. Even if the outcome isn't what you hope for, facing your problems head-on allows you to learn and grow. When you choose avoidance, you don't just miss the lesson, you risk creating deeper wounds that do not heal. When it comes to real life, there's a safety element to this, but just like with anything, moderation and context. The technological walls we build up to protect ourselves can become prisons that trap us in cycles of misunderstanding and pain. As shown in White Christmas, what starts as a digital barrier can manifest into real-world consequences that ripple through lives and generations. The true horror isn't just in the technology itself, but in our growing tendency to substitute genuine human connection with digital distance.
I am him, ultra instinct, bitch, I'm going super saiyan. I can't trust an Android, my iPhone been ringing. I might go cop another one, make my way to the Europeans, baby. I'll be back next weekend, only getting better every season. Since say la vie to my old girl, okay, one more time, then I'm leaving. Peace and deuces, truth is, I can't